Hello, everybody. Roger Durling here with the Santa Barbara International Film Festival. Thank you for the wait. It's definitely worth it. I'm so happy that we're joined here with Academy Award winning uh, director Bryan Fogel and his new film, The Dissident. I actually was reading the Variety review, and I want to quote from it. It says, "It's become common, if not cliche, for a critic reviewing a documentary about a turbulent real life world event to write something like it exerts the power of a true life thriller. Well, make no mistake, The Dissident does." Welcome, Bryan. What an extraordinary story. What it's so almost surreal is the level of subjects and storylines that intersect in your documentary. When you started working on this and you got the idea that you wanted to do this story, did you know that there was all these levels of themes and subjects in it?
Well, first of all, it's an honor to be talking to you again, the Santa Barbara Film Festival.
Oh, thank you.
You're such a supporter of Icarus, and so it's just wonderful to be back in conversation with this new film. So thanks, Roger.
Yeah, likewise.
This following Icarus, I was looking for what that story was going to be. I was trying to figure out what was the next film I was going to make, and having went through the journey of making Icarus, where I ended up protecting a whistleblower, literally helping save his life, bring him into protective custody, bring the story to the New York Times, et cetera, and then follow those events as they happened in real time, and a global crisis ensued. But the underlying issues of that, of fake news, fake truth, and a ruthless dictatorship hunting Gregory Rodchenkov that was willing to stop at nothing to cover up their lies. Um, I came out of that experience wanting to see to it that the next film that I made, um, I would feel had importance, that it was beyond just a movie or a documentary, that there was a social justice cause, that there was something that people could watch the film and be enraged about and want to take action about. And so, here I was trying to figure out what that was going to be. And in the first couple weeks of October 2018, I think the whole world was captivated by this murder, this gruesome murder of a Washington Post journalist, a Saudi journalist, Jamal Khashoggi, who walks into his own consulate to get marriage papers, to be brutally murdered for doing nothing more than essentially advocating for freedom of speech, human rights, and some sort of parliamentary democracy in his country that he loved. And as this story unfolded, the light bulbs went off in my head, and I said, "Hey, this feels like this could be it. This is a thriller. This is a murder. This is something that people need to learn about." And as I learned more about Jamal and realized that he was a moderate, that he wasn't, an Islamic ISIS sympathizer, terrorist extremist, friend of bin Laden, as he was being painted, and I started reading his Washington Post articles, I became more enraged and more wanting to tell this story. And so, literally by second week of October, I was in touch with the Washington Post. I flew to Washington. They said, "Yeah, we'd love to work with you." But the big elements to me was Jamal's fiance, Atija Jengas, who was obviously going through just immeasurable pain and loss. I mean, to this day, I can't begin to fathom that. Omar Abdulaziz in Canada, the young Saudi dissident living in self-exile, who was and is still a victim of Saudi's human rights violations. His brothers sit in jail. His friends and family sit in jail simply for knowing him because they worked with Jamal. And then, of course, there was the whole hacking story behind this that was starting to emerge. and the Turks and their story, and if they'd grant me access. And I spent the next several months building these relationships of trust between Hatice, Omar, the Turks, the Washington Post, the cybersecurity experts. Um, and when I felt that all of those boxes, had been checked, I embarked to make the film.
And how did you come in to know about Omar, which is such a fascinating character?
Well, there was two things that had happened. After my very first trip to Istanbul, I came back. I went and spent 5 weeks in Istanbul, where I met with Hatice many times, and we weren't filming. It was just building trust.
Trust, yeah.
Um, she didn't even speak English at the time. She's now fluent. I mean, I've watched her grow um, from this grieving fiance to this incredible defender of Jamal's legacy and human rights in English. And there was a story emerging. The New York Times did a story about Omar, and Omar was claiming that he knew why Jamal was killed and that his phone had been hacked, but they had hacked Jamal's phone too, and that they were working on, basically trying to subvert the Saudi narrative and their takeover of Twitter. And he was saying there was audio, that he had the proof behind this, but he was not willing to share that information yet. And that to me felt like was the the pulse of the story, because here
Hmm.
I was still alive. And the Human Rights Foundation, Thor Halvorson, who hosts the Oslo Freedom Forums in Oslo every year and everywhere, whose work is basically defending human rights, had been in communication with Omar Abdulaziz. I got connected to Thor. Thor said, "Look, we want to help you make this film. We want to finance this film. This checks all the mandates of Human Rights Foundation. And by the way, this guy in Canada, Omar Abdulaziz, um, I can connect you to him because we've been in contact." So Thor and his team connected me to Omar. This was, literally, within weeks of Jamal's murder. Omar and I started talking. I went to Montreal, and then over the next 6 months, we would shoot with Omar in between me being in Istanbul and then going to Montreal. And each time we would shoot with Omar, we'd leave him all the camera cards because at that point he wasn't ready to participate. And about 6 months down the line, he hands me and my team back all of the camera cards and says to me, "You're my brother. I trust
Oh,
you.
wow.
Let's let's do this." And and he's still in the same situation as he is today. He's in self-exile in Canada. He's lives under the protection of Canadian intelligence in fear of his life, while his brothers sit in prison uh, without charges, having been tortured for 2 years, 33 of his friends in jail. His family's unable to leave. And in the meantime, you have all the members of the G20 doing business with the Saudis. You have every American media company doing business with the Saudis. You have Netflix announcing an 8-picture deal with the Saudis. You have Amazon buying suit the the Amazon of Saudi Arabia. You have Hollywood accepting hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of Saudi investment, all willing to look the other way of what is going on in this country.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I saw it very timely because tomorrow, 60 Minutes is doing a story related to this, right? That the Saudis are escaping American justice. It's on tomorrow night. Going back to Omar and Hatice, is the how were you doing this time? I mean, there was the importance of making sure that you had the exclusivity, that you were the person that they spoke to. What was that? Were you concerned about that? Was that ever in jeopardy? Um,
Well, when I set out going, okay, can I make this film, right? Every media outlet in the world was approaching Atija, She had went from, somebody that of course nobody would know to being in the center of a global, tornado. Omar in many ways as well, and of course the Turks. And so I said, well, if I'm going to do this, it has to be exclusive. Otherwise, the 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 story I don't think will have the impact and the weight that it will have. And I explained that to Atija, and I explained that to Omar, and the promise that I made to them is I said, listen, I know what you're going through, but I'm not here for a day. I'm not here for a week. I'm not here for a month. I'm here to roll up my sleeves and go on this journey with you, fight for you, work with you, and do everything I can to fight for Jamal's legacy and justice for Jamal. And as much as I'm making a film, I'm an activist too. And if you go look at Icarus and you see what transpired between Gregory Vachenkov and I, and to this day, our team and people on that team are working to protect him and to keep him safe. That I said, look, this isn't me with the camera showing up and leaving the next day and exploiting your story. This is us basically locking arms and going on a journey together. And I'm gonna stick through this with you for as long as it takes. And that, I think, was the trust that was built that allowed that access to be had. And the same with the Turkish government. They were obviously wanting to tell the story, and they wanted to see to it that it was told right. And they were concerned that, a filmmaker would come in there, and of course they have their own political issues. I mean, we can't turn a blind eye to, the human rights issues involving Turkey, their own issues, and there are many. But what I said to the Turks is I said, look, I'm not here to make that film. I'm here to make a film about the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. And in this case, Turkey was on the right side of this. You can say there was political motivations. They were trying to do, there's all these, didn't matter. It was, they were on the right side of this murder. And to this day are the only country in the world that was seeking justice and accountability for it. So I said, look, if you open up that access to me, if you allow these people to talk to me, if you provide me with that transcript, if you provide me with that police footage, the evidence, the video, the stuff in that, I mean, without going into detail, almost everything you see in that film is exclusive.
Mhm.
And Turkey's, over months and months and months of trust building and meetings and back and forth to Ankara and back, said, okay, we want to be as helpful as possible. And that was, ultimately the decision of a president and, the head of Turkish intelligence. And they provided me with what I needed to be able to tell the story, hopefully as best as I could.
Hatice becomes the emotional grounding force in the film. In when did you realize that was the entryway? We're very emotionally invested with her.
Look, from the outset, I think, just speaking cinematically for a moment,
Yeah.
I think when you're looking at crafting a film, right? You're thinking about, okay, who will the audience fall in love with and connect to? Well, because Jamal's dead, and so that can only be archival footage. And in archival footage, you can know someone, but you don't know them. And most of all that footage of Jamal was him being interviewed, him on news stations, him, working. It's not that deep emotional story. And so to me, I saw an audience being able to love Jamal by being able to fall in love with Atisha.
Mhm.
And that ultimately she was the emotional connection of the film. And that her story would be the emotional resonance of the film. And, and that's why, I saw that early on in the process. And I looked at, how to craft the story that it is a thriller, and that it's a cinematic thriller, and that it's constructed as a thriller with the sound and the soundtrack from Adam Peters, and how we're editing and how it was shot in verite, and looking at, Paul Greengrass, one of my favorite directors, and
Yeah.
how he makes a Bourne film, and employing, all those big CGI graphics and animations, and bringing people into that visual world. But at the same time, that really emotional story of Hatice on that journey, in between the murder mystery, in between the investigation, and in between the thriller of what was Omar's life and is Omar's life. And Hatice was the emotional connection, and hopefully that an audience falls in love with Hatice and her fight, and through doing that wants to fight for justice for Jamal. Um, One of the most heartbreaking moments of filming was when she spoke in front of the United Nations, and we were granted
Yeah.
access with our cameras, which was extraordinary to be able to shoot at the UN, which, is just something that usually doesn't happen. And we weren't expecting the Saudis to walk out as she went to speak. And I remember I started crying as I saw that, because I was, you know, there, sitting, as the director, as the cameras were working, and as she went to speak, to watch those two guys get up and leave the room, I just, tears just started to pour from me, because I couldn't imagine what that would be like.
hmm hmm one of the things that I remember when I first heard about the assassination of Khashoggi was that, I was aware of who he was, but I really didn't know much about him. I didn't know what he stood for, etc. Was that similar in your case, that you started uncovering, who this man was as you were doing the investigation?
100%. I mean, look, I mean, I think I'm reading the story, and it is on the front page of the New York Times every day for a month, or the Washington Post, or on CNN. I mean, it had taken over the news media, and I had not heard of Jamal Khashoggi until, he vanished and the story got brought public on October 3rd. But so it was a learning journey for me of reading his writings, reading his literature, his books, reading his Washington Post article, and that really factored into my decision making as to whether or not I was going to go invest what's now been 2 years of my life in Jamal Khashoggi. And what I found in reading his materials, and in the first several months of the project or through, I had many Arabic speakers that I'd brought on in Los Angeles to help translate, writings, translate things that were in Arabic, translate news shows, translate Al Jazeera, translate interviews. And I said to my team many times, I said, "So, do you like Jamal?" And they'd all say, "He seemed like a really, really good man." And in knowing Hatice and seeing the kind of woman that she was, I said, "Well, any woman that would want to be like a man, like with a man like this, clearly this was a good man." And as I read his writings, and I read what he was writing about, and I got to know Omar and the people that were in his life, like Hawala Khanfar and Ayman Noor, and Turan Kislaki, and Yasin Akhtai and his circle of friends, and I got to know all these people and like them. I said, "Well, you're known by the friends you keep," and that made me, you know, um, from afar, love Jamal and want to
Mhm,
fight with him.
mhm.
Uh, and so, it was a learning process for me as I went through this journey. But what I uncovered, and sure, every person has his flaws. Every person, has things that you might disagree with, or positions or policies they might disagree with. But nobody deserves to be cut into pieces in your own consulate for disagreeing or having a differing opinion than your government.
Which leads me to my question is like one, cinematically, it's unforgettable. the way you reveal to us eventually what happened inside. Can you tell us about the construction of that sequence? And I greatly admire the amount, the way you give us information. It leads up to it, and then it is devastating to hear what happened inside there.
You know, we myself and Mark Monroe, who, you end up ultimately everything ends up becoming scripted, even though it's a documentary. You're taking all this material and everything you shot and then turning it into transcripts and turning those transcripts and everything into a script. And the sequence that we built, we called The Perfect Storm. And that was hopefully this edge of your seat story between Jamal and Hatijah getting ready to enter that consulate, Omar and the bees as they start, climbing up that ladder in Twitter, and all of that crescendoing as he walks into that consulate, and then that transitions into his actual murder. And the construction of that was very, very, thought out of how to bring, these basically three storylines: Jamal, Hatijah, Omar, the transcript of his murder, and then of course the Turks, and how to intercut those to make it build and build with tension. And when we actually constructed the scene of his murder, I was provided the transcript by Turkey. I'm one of the only people in the world outside of the CIA, British intelligence, the French, and the Turks that actually have that transcript. And Turkey, it's 37 pages. Turkey had leaked, a paragraph here and a line here, but not the whole transcript. And they finally decided to give me that transcript, literally a month before Sundance. And I'd been asking for it for a month, and they said, well, when's Sundance? And I said, well, it's the end of January. They said, okay, so we'll give it to you January 1st. And I said, guys, this isn't a news show. I need months to be able to build this. So when we went to Sundance with the film, the Sundance cut versus the cut that you've seen and your audience seen changed a lot. And we went back and worked for 6 months after Sundance. And all 6 months of that work was on that perfect storm and the transcript, the murder, of how to make that transcript hopefully feel visceral, like its own character, that you were there in the room, and through the sound, the music, the use of color, light flashes, the visualization, the animation, how we turn that transcript into something that is alive, hopefully, had the response of what happened. And
Oh,
that
no,
was,
absolutely. And also, the other aspect is watching the reaction of the people telling us, I forget his name, um,
Irfan Fidas, the prosecutor.
correct. Yeah. I mean, his reaction to what is happening is so it's chilling. Yeah.
Yeah, he's I mean, he could not, I mean, he is, what a character, right? I mean,
Mhm.
he's so believable, and also kind of like,
But it's a moment where you leave us to the imagination of what actually, I mean, you see the reaction in his face, and you actually, it adds so much power, the fact that it leaves us to imagine to actually what happened. I was going to lead to the fact that you deal with abstract political problems in the documentary. I mean, you're dealing with hacking, you're dealing with the privacy, you're dealing with human rights, and all this different themes, and Khashoggi embodies all of these different political problems where can you talk about that, and the fact that through your documentary you're able to put a face to all these different abstract problems.
well, you know, I'm I made the film because I believe that the world can and should be a better place, and it's a stupid thing to say because we all believe that, but I really believe in taking on stories that I think can have impact, and I believe that film has that power, that medium, to bring out that visceral response way outside the pages of a newspaper. You pick up and you know you read a story in the New York Times like you do today, and but it just doesn't it it it, it's words on a page. And what film does is it's able to transcend those words on a page or a story into news and hopefully bring people to take action. And my goal was that there could and will be justice for Jamal. And in juggling all these issues, you're faced with the reality of these issues too. And what you see in the film is you see world leaders, but of course the Trump administration, do everything they can to protect Saudi for their own business interests, personal interests, perhaps American interests to continue to sell billions of dollars of weapons to the Saudis. You see the United Nations, after Agnes Callamard's thorough investigation and open and closed case of this murder and who ordered this murder, and even the CIA finding that Mohammed bin Salman ordered this murder, basically not take it to the UN Security Council, not take it to the General Assembly, not take it to The Hague, not take it to the criminal court, basically go, we're going to allow this to happen. And then in the own distribution of this film, taking myself out of it, I don't care as me, Bryan, that Netflix didn't acquire this film because they have a right to take any content they want. What I care about is that in the cowardice of these major media companies that could have given this film light, that could have distributed this film to hundreds of millions of people around the planet, which would have fought for justice for Jamal, which would have fought for Omar's brothers sitting in a jail, that would have fought for Omar's friends sitting in a jail, that would have helped bring closure for Atija Cengiz, that would help the tens of thousands of Saudis sitting in jails that have not been charged with crimes other than sending a tweet against the kingdom, or the 900 Saudis that were beheaded this year for speaking out against the kingdom. When they don't take a film like this to protect their own business interests, to protect their own subscriber growth, to protect their own shareholder value, the world becomes a more dangerous place. And that is what I worry about as a filmmaker, because I want to keep telling stories like this. I want to keep doing work like this because people on this planet, deserve to be able to hear these stories, share these stories, and action and social action comes from the sharing of these stories. That was what was so powerful about the BLM movement. That's what's so powerful about Me Too, and all these other social movements around the world from the Arab Spring, that people were able to communicate and share these stories. And what has happened with this film, and in essence, the silencing of this film through these major media companies, is not allowing for the free dissemination of information to allow for the empowerment of people to take action.
Mhm. And I mean, I think you've sort of addressed the reason, but why is it that with all the staggering amount of evidence that there is and that you've put together in the documentary, why is it that no nation is willing to stand up for against this?
Well, look at the relationship with China, right? I mean, here China goes and essentially invades Hong Kong, cracks down against dissent, arrests people, shoots them, and basically has brought Hong Kong, which was a democracy for decades and decades and decades, a thriving democracy under communist rule. And what has the world done in this? Have we punished China? Have we sanctioned China? Is Disney no longer doing business with China? Is our companies no longer investing in China? Is the world sanctioning China? Is the NBA taking action against China? Are airlines no longer flying to China? Going on and on and on, right? And what we
Mhm.
see is that business and money ultimately, you know, rules and conquers all. And until as a people, we're able to separate those two things and go, you know what? We might lose a couple 100,000 subscribers, or we might lose, a couple $100 million in revenue, but we're going to go and protect the Uyghurs that are being killed in China. We're going to see to it that people in Saudi Arabia, that even though we might not be able to truly make a change, we're going to stand up and have the ethical values of our company, of our governments, of our leaders, to hold these people accountable. And that's how
Mhm.
change comes. And you can look at this throughout all the world. I mean, this is not a new problem. This has been going on forever. That money, power, wealth, investment, all these things, corrupt the greater good. And it's where we are as a society. I am hopeful that Biden, at least he has made several statements that he is planning to really re-examine the U.S. relationship with Saudi Arabia when he takes office. He has said that that's a priority of his administration. He's sent out messages, literally saying justice for Jamal. So, I'm hopeful that as a new administration takes place, that at least in the United States, there might be a change in direction.
Mhm. Um, has Omar and Hatice been able to see the film
They have.
and their thoughts, if you don't mind sharing?
I was with Atija. She came to Sundance, and every time she came to the stage, the audience would just get on their feet. And we went to the Zurich Film Festival together. It was, even with all the social distancing, they still had screenings. This was about 7 weeks ago. And she went with me there with Agnes Callamard, the UN Special Rapporteur.
Mhm.
And again, at the end of the film, as Hatice would come on stage, audiences would stand on their feet. And I would just sit there with tears in my eyes, like a proud brother, seeing the power of this woman and how brave she has been to continue this fight really all alone. Jamal's family is in Saudi, and they've essentially been silenced. They've been bought off for their silence, because you can understand why they wouldn't want to speak out when you see what happens to Omar, right? And
Mhm.
and Omar has, seen the film as well. And as the film rolls out, he's going to start being involved in interviews and press, as well as Atisha, because I made the film for the two of them. I, I didn't make the film for me. So it's pretty cool that to have their love and support. And I hope I can make them proud as the months, go on, and the film will make its way into the world.
Yeah, and I, Brian, you know that I'm a big fan, and one of the reasons why I'm a huge fan of what you do is because with Icarus and now with the Dissident, you seek for the truth, and but at the same time, you are quite an amazing filmmaker in the way you put the material together. And the question is that something that you're conscious about balancing, that the theme of your movie and getting to the truth, etc. But at the same time, the way it's put together is so incredible. I mean, you mentioned the sound, the editing, the construction of it. So, can you address that?
Well, I don't, I think that it's that fine balance. And, I don't think one has to be without the other. So with Icarus, I was in a real world thriller as it was happening. I mean, literally, what that film is and that journey of the film is completely authentic. But when it came time to craft that film, I said, well, what is this? This is a Bourne movie. This is a thriller. And how do we craft that? Because if you can engage an audience cinematically, visually, sound, music, all these things, then you can impact an audience. And so what I learned from the journey of Icarus and all the animations that went into that and the sound design and going to Skywalker Sound, which is, arguably the best in the world, and working with Adam Peters, who composed the score for Icarus and composed the score for Dissident, but he's also done all of Oliver Stone's films, and he's a brilliant musician, where you start learning these techniques of how to tell an authentic story, but also the techniques of a storyteller, of a filmmaker, of a director, of how to craft that story to have resonance. And so when me and my creative team are looking at these big pictures, you start coming up with these things like the bees and the flies. Okay, well, you go, what's the bees and the flies? And Omar's like, oh, well, Saudi Arabia is like messing with Twitter, and they've got a bunch of guys sitting in a room and they're sending out fake tweets, and we're trying to combat them by sending out our own fake tweets, but our tweets are good and their tweets are bad. And so you start getting into your mind of like, okay, how can I turn this into something visual that will engage? And so we started going, okay, let's create that room of Saudi trolls, but make it into the ether, because it's cyber. It's real, but it's not real. And so we came up with using this point cloud capture technique to make almost these hologram images of that Saudi troll room. And the bees and the flies, it felt like this moment where we could, create this kind of CGI Pixar quality animation, but in order to tell the story of this takeover of cyberspace, we looked at the same thing with Pegasus and thinking, okay, you have a virus in your phone, it's communicating with the server, but how can we visually do that? And we went to ODD New York, Office of Design and Development in New York, who also did all our graphic work and animations for Icarus. And we said, okay, here's what Pegasus does. Here's what, how can we basically deconstruct a phone and show what this is? And they started coming up with renderings and animations. And then it's just that whole creative process when you bring together a great team of collaborators. Myself as the director, I just view myself only as good as all the creatives and collaborators that I get to work with, and they bring me ideas and I bring them ideas, and then we all just geek out about it for months and hundreds of thousands of hours to craft it. And that's the joy of making film. And then hopefully at the end of that, you have a bigger story that people care about and want to do something about.
Yeah, well, I have to say that that bees sequence it's scary, it's horrifying. I mean, the way you were able to articulate that is it's I mean, yeah, it would, I've seen it a couple of times now, and it is a truly terrifying sequence. My last question, Bryan. So I think you've addressed this, but I would love to hear from you one more time about what would you like the impact of this film to be?
Well, what I want the impact of the film to be, it's very hard to go into something with an agenda, because with what's happened with COVID, with all the bigger issues that are going on in the world, it's very hard to, go, I want this, I need this, I have to have this. So I think, if I said, what do I want the impact of the film to be? Is I want people, when this comes out, or in 6 months from now, or a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 5 years from now, go, oh yeah, I remember that story of Jamal Khashoggi, and yeah, now I know who he was, and we should do something about that. And that impact can be anything from writing a letter to your senator, writing a letter to a representative, telling your friends that you need to see the film, helping it on its path to, to gain recognition so that more and more people get to see it. And ultimately, I think it's a record, it's an archive of, of something that happened that shouldn't have happened, that is still happening. And that is a reminder of why we have to protect democracy, why we had to protect freedom of press, why we have to protect journalism, and also hold these companies accountable that choose not to do that for their own business interests. And I think if I say that the impact of this is that in a year from now, we're having a different conversation because the Biden administration has made it easier for these companies to actually stand up and to refuse Saudi money until things have changed. I don't think it's about boycotting Saudi Arabia. I think it's about leading pressure to change, because there can be a better way. And I hope that the film will lead people to not be fearful, but instead to feel empowered to make that change. And that's what I'm hopeful for. I mean, I made this film for Jamal, and I made it for Atija, and I made it for Omar, and I made it for the tens of thousands of people that sit in Saudi jails that don't have freedom of speech, that don't have freedom of speech, that don't have freedom of press, that don't have freedom of opinion. And if they do, there's a good possibility that it will cost them their lives.
Mhm. So you don't have to go into details, but have you zero in on your new subject?
I'm working on two projects right now. One we'll announce shortly, but the film is well on its way, and it's a story that but I think it's along the same trajectory of the work that I've been doing.
Terrific.
I'm producing a music film, but it's something that's very personal and a very personal story. And I'm working on a scripted limited series. I can't quite announce with who and with what studio, but it follows one of the most egregious human rights violations and murders in modern history. And again, it's a story of justice and accountability. So trying to keep on the same trajectory of telling stories that have impact, and hopefully being able to use my skills as a filmmaker to craft those stories.
The high skills of a filmmaker. You're definitely one of the filmmakers I look forward to the most. So I'll be anxiously looking forward to your next project. And on that note, thank you so much, Bryan, for taking the time to chat with us. And the film is The Dissident, and it's coming out very, very soon. And thank you. Thank you. Bless you.
It'll be in limited theaters, I guess not in California, December 25th, but then it'll be on video on demand across all platforms January 8th. And I know we're sending out screeners, and it's on the platform. So, just really looking forward to people being able to see the film. And I'm very appreciative to you, Roger, and the Santa Barbara Film Festival for helping give this film some light and some love. It's really greatly appreciated. I know Jamal and Atija and Omar are grateful as well. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and stay well, and thanks again.
Thanks. It's really good to see you.
Likewise. Ciao.